Have you ever wondered how the Victorians were in the bedroom? If so, then you're in luck. We've done a deep dive into their history to bring you an eye-opening account of the 6 most shocking, unusual intimacy practices of the Victorian era. Welcome to the curious world of Victorian intimacy practices. Before we dive into the list, let's get a quick overview of what life was like in the Victorian era. So if you're ready to learn more about these strange and fascinating habits of yesteryear, right on, you're in for a ride. 1. The marriage bed. It may be hard to believe, but the Victorian era hosted a number of unusual intimacy practices. One such practice was known as the marriage bed. This was a bed that was placed within the walls of a couple's bedroom, which they shared only on their wedding night and then never again. The idea was that this bed would be pure and untainted by any other activity that happened within the walls of the couple's bedroom. It was believed that this practice would ensure long-lasting fidelity and maintain the sanctity of marriage among couples. What's more, it was also rumored that if a wife were to break her wedding vows, then she would be rejected from ever using this bed again, a sure sign of her moral depravity in the eyes of society. In hindsight, it is quite clear how ridiculous this practice seems and how it ultimately did not serve its intended purpose. Nevertheless, it remains an interesting example of how society imposes rules with good intentions and how quickly those can become obsolete over time. 2. Unconventional bedroom activities. We all know that the Victorian era was a period of prudishness and decorum, but it turns out they had a bit of a wild side when it came to bedroom activities. Here are some of the most unusual practices. Separate beds. Believe it or not, some married couples in the Victorian era didn't even share a bed. Due to the emphasis on modesty and propriety, it wasn't considered proper for couples to be seen together in bed. As such, some opted to keep separate beds, which they would sometimes bring together just before sleeping. Private rooms. If a husband and wife wanted to engage in something more risque than what was considered socially acceptable, they could go into one of their private rooms where no servants were allowed and get creative. This way, no one else needed to ever know about what was going on behind closed doors. So there you have it. These unusual intimacy practices are surely surprising. Who knew such activities would take place during this time period? 3. Unusual fertility remedies. You might not believe this, but there were many unusual fertility remedies during the Victorian era. These remedies included some that are considered quite strange by modern standards. Some of the more popular fertility remedies used in the Victorian era include potions and tonics. Many Victorians believed that certain concoctions, such as herbal teas, potions, and tonics made from natural ingredients could aid in conception. These concoctions were believed to help increase a woman's fertility and provide her with more energy for conception. These practices may sound strange by today's standards, but many Victorian women actually followed these unusual fertility practices in order to increase their chance of conceiving. 4. Strange courtship customs. So, what about courtship rituals? Those were pretty strange too. Here's a few of the most unusual practices that couples observe in order to get to know each other. No handshakes. Back then, touching hands was considered utterly improper until after the couple had become engaged. Chaperones were required for all social engagements between unmarried couples. Even after engagement, the couple weren't allowed to talk to each other in private. Their parents, or chaperones, had to be with them at all times. If a man wanted to court a woman, he had to ask her father for permission first, and if her father said no, there was very little he could do about it. Unmarried women weren't allowed to walk around in public without a male relative accompanying them, so they usually resorted to taking long walks away from prying eyes and ears of their chaperones. A man had to offer marriage before he even kissed her. Once he did make an offer and she accepted it, they could kiss each other on the cheek as a sign of agreement, but that was it. Courting couples could write love letters as long as they addressed each other with impersonal addresses such as "my dear friend" or "my dear acquaintance." Pretty strange stuff, right? But back then, these courting customs were followed strictly by every well-bred young couple who wanted to get married. 5. The role of the midwife in childbirth. Believe it or not, the Victorian era was a time of some very unusual intimacy practices when it came to childbirth. Back then, the midwife played a huge role in childbirth, and they were present during labor and delivery of the baby. The idea was that the midwife would offer moral support to the woman throughout her labor. But what exactly did this look like? Here's a closer look. Midwives as doulas. Victorian midwives acted as doulas for expecting mothers. A doula is an experienced supporter who provides guidance and physical comfort during labor, delivery, and postpartum care. In other words, these midwives had a hands-on approach to supporting women during labor and delivery. They would often massage the abdomen or back of an expecting mother to help ease pain and stress during childbirth. 6. Unconventional taboo activities. You might not believe it, but some of the intimacy practices of the Victorian era were anything but conventional. It's thought that during this era, unconventional activities were often considered taboo. These activities often took place in secret and were not talked about openly. Charivari. One of these activities was called charivari, which was when a group of people would dress up in costumes and create a lot of noise outside a couple's house who were thought to have had an illegal marriage or union. This ritual would happen late at night and would persist until the offending couple gave them money or food. It is quite surprising what kind of unusual intimacy practices could still be found in the Victorian era despite its rigid social rules and expectations. There is no exact proof that these practices actually existed beyond hearsay, but they do provide an interesting look into how the Victorians lived their lives, even if it went against societal norms. I hope you will enjoy the video. Please share your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe our channel for more upcoming videos. Thanks.